this video, I'm going to show you 8 ways to get your 808s to slap in FL Studio. Let's get right into it. Number one thing that people don't talk about, and an underrated strategy really for 808s, is just find samples that sound good. I know that's kind of subjective, but it's true. You have to have your ear trained. A lot of times the 808s just don't sound that great, or they don't match the project, match the beat that you're working on. A couple of things that I look for in an 808: does it cut through the mix? Does it sound good in the key that my beat is currently in? In this case, so this beat we could see is in F major. But that doesn't necessarily mean that our root note is going to be in F. So when I found this 808, I went through Decap's Drums That Knock. This is volume 9. I use different 808s all the time. Sometimes I use my own, sometimes I use other people's. But what I look for is one that just sounds good in the key that I'm working on. Or maybe I'll have to transpose the beat. But this one right here, this wide, short, fat chunk 808, just sounded like it had a nice little transient at the beginning, like a nice punch to it. And I didn't have to tune it because it's in C. And then this became the 808 pattern. Very, very simple. Number 2 is actually making sure that your 808 is in key. A lot of times, a lot of problems that producers have is that it sounds out of key, and it's because the root note is something different. So what you put in the piano roll is not actually what it looks like it is in the piano roll. Even though you have a chord progression that matches that 808, if that 808 sample is in a different key as that one shot, it's not going to match up unless you tune it. So the way to tune it is, let's say we pull in something that's not a C, right? In this case, let's just pull a sample in. Right here, it tells us that it's in E. Right click here, go to Edison, or you can hit Control E. You can open up Edison, click this little tool right here next to the wrench, detect pitch regions, make sure that it's in E, because sometimes it could be wrong, and especially if it's not labeled. If it's not labeled, definitely do this. I always just like to double check, because sometimes people that tune them and label them can sometimes get them wrong. Then I go back to this little wrench tool right here, and then above E, so we're on C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, right click right above E, and it'll make that little blue mark on E. Now you're good. Now whatever you put in the piano roll is going to actually match the note that it says it is in the piano roll. So now an A is an A, and E is an E, and so on and so on. Number 3 is actually in the piano roll. If you look, when you create a pattern, all these levels and these velocity levels down here are not at 100%. That's not a huge deal, but it sometimes will make you lack a little bit in that low end, and that sample is not hitting all the way at 100%. So what I do every time I create a pattern, I just boost all these levels up. And this goes for kicks as well, and snares if you want to do it with snares. But pretty much any sample that you start and you create a pattern out of inside the piano roll, it's not hitting at 100%, actually hitting at 80. So turn all these up, go straight across. Now all those samples are hitting at 100% velocity, and they'll smack a little bit harder. Number 4 is actually adding some sort of distortion, or maybe some stereo width or stereo separation. And I know number 1, I said find a good sample that you don't have to really do anything to, but sometimes you want that little extra boost, that little extra oomph, that little extra sizzle. So I created this free patcher preset for FL Studio. It's literally just drag and drop, and what it is a multi-band distortion plugin, essentially, inside Patcher. And you can see a little bit of the back end, how it works. 2 different distortions, and then we have 3 Maximus, 1 dedicated to the high, 1 dedicated to the mid, and 1 dedicated to the low end, and then a chorus and a stereo shaper. So with this 808, we can give it a listen without this Patcher preset. It sounds good. Let's say we wanted a little bit more distortion and a little bit more stereo width in there. Turn that back on, and this is default as is. You can, of course, go into every one of these plugins inside Patcher and adjust distortion, or adjust the high end inside a Maximus mid or low, or the chorus, or you can go in there and you can fine tune whatever you'd like. This is just a default preset as is, and a lot of times it sounds good. What I'll do is I'll throw this on and just kind of like turn the mix knob down a little bit, right? Not leave it all the way at 100 unless it sounds good. But this is with it on. And then off again. On. It's very subtle. So like I said, I like to just turn this mix knob down a little bit. Just a little bit in there. Something subtle, it's just gonna help that 808 just shine a little bit more. We wanna hear that 808 through the phone. We want it to hear it on a laptop speaker. This is how you do that. It's usually distortion, high-end stuff, and harmonics. And by the way, if you wanna grab this patch or preset for free, I'll leave the link down in the description below. All right, and number 5 is actually something to do with kick drums. What I like to do is add kick drums to either emphasize the 808 a little bit more or complement it and offset it just a little bit. And in this case, you probably heard earlier that I threw like a stomp, and there's another like solid kick in there as well. They complement the 808. They don't play the exact same pattern as the 808, but it also helps the 808 seem like it's hitting a little bit harder. So you give it a listen and see if you can pick it out with the stomp and the other kick. Right now I'll solo everything out. So this is the stomp. We get a solid kick, and then here's our 808. I'll just move these closer together. So like I said, it's just there to complement the 808 really, because the 808 is the main focus when you're listening to that rhythm section, but that kick and the stomp kind of just really just are there to complement things. And then EQing those accordingly so that way, again, the 808 seems as if it's hitting a little bit harder. I took some low end out of that stomp just using this simple EQ down here, and then I spread the stereo just a little bit, make it a little bit wider so again it doesn't clash in the middle with that 808. And then this solid kick I left as is. It's not too much of an overpowering kick, and I just lowered that level. You can see they're visibly lower than the 808. Number 6 is the good old soft clipper. Now this is what makes FL Studio stand out, because the stock Fruity soft clipper is just one of a kind, very easy, almost no CPU, and it gets things to just smack. I throw this on 808s, I throw it on kicks, I throw it on snares, throw it on my master, like you name it. Fruity soft clipper is the way to go. So we go down here, Fruity soft clipper. I'll adjust the threshold a little bit, give it a little bit more curve there, solo that out. Gives it that much more of a punch. Number 7, I'll talk about a little bit of the bounce. And I just wanted to touch on this because a lot of times I'll post a video like this and people say, damn, I got to do all these things to my 808. No, these are just 8 different ways that you can get your 808 to hit harder. So again, number 7, I'll talk a little bit about the pattern and how I came about this specific pattern for this sample chop. In this beat, I created the sample chop first. And what I do a lot of times, and almost every single time, is listen to that melody. Listen and try to feel for where the rhythm section should sit. And then I'll go with the 808 and try to create some sort of bounce, especially with this beat right here being at 137 BPM. It has a certain bounce to it. So when I created this sample chop, I'm listening and seeing like where I'm bobbing my head and where I want that 808 to really accent and come through. And that's where I started. Doom, 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 doom. So I'm hearing that in my head, and that just takes practice, just years of doing this. You hear that in your own head, and then that's where I created this. And really, it's just a simple 808 pattern that just kind of repeats over and over again, and then just the last notes just go up to that higher E. The sample dictated these last 2 notes, because you can hear in that sample, the sample actually does that. Right at the end. It's actually hitting those 2 notes the same way. And that double one right there is just to add a little bit of bounce to it. And that's really it. Everything else switches around that and makes it what it is. It goes into this other section. 808 stays the same. Number 8, I didn't necessarily do it in this beat, but I'll show you exactly how to sidechain kicks to your 808s. That can really get the 808 to hit a little bit harder or be perceived as hitting harder. That way the kick and the 808 don't clash together. In this case, they didn't sound like they clashed and didn't sound like it needed it, so I didn't use it. That again is another example of not needing to do every single one of these tricks to your 808s. But I'll show you how to do it in this specific beat just to do it. So I'll choose the solid kick to the 808. We'll just solo those 2 out like this. I'll actually just loop this section right here. So we'll highlight the kick, go over to the 808, right click here and hit sidechain to this track, click on the 808, and then down at the bottom. So that way if we have any other effects on there, we're not sidechaining before those effects. We want to sidechain after those effects. So I'll put the fruity limiter on, go to the fruity limiter, and then go to the compressor setting, and then go to sidechain 1. If you have multiple sidechains, you'll see that you can go to different numbers, but here we only have 1. I'm just here, all I'm doing is adjusting the threshold, the ratio, and this release. Now this release is gonna really tell us how fast we want that sidechain to pull back. What's happening here is we're just trying to carve out a space from where the kick hits to the 808 hits. That way the kick doesn't clash with the 808. So we're gonna duck the 808 down just the exact length of the kick drum, so it sounds like they become almost one instrument, and you can actually see it and hear it. See right there, you could actually see it working. So this carve, this little triangle that comes down here, is how much is getting carved out of that 808 sample. I want to pull that release back a little bit because I want a little bit less. And this threshold right here is going to make this level come up, and it's going to be a little bit less. If we go down here, we're going to have a lot more. You can see that we have a lot more. And the threshold is going to do that as well. So we can bring this up. I don't want it to sound like a pulsating effect, like an EDM effect here. I want just enough to carve the kick out to get a nice clean sound. That's really it. I'll leave this for now. But like I said, this beat specifically didn't really need a sidechain. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching. And if you want to grab that patch or preset for free, click the link down in the description and I'll send it to you. And as always, make sure to share this with a friend if you get me.